For more on China-Africa relations, earlier I spoke to Hank Cohen. He's the former ambassador to Gambia and Senegal, and he also held the position of Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs. I asked him for his view on the Beijing Summit.
Well, China has a very big presence in Africa. I remember 20 years ago, there was virtually nothing. But now China is a major importer of African commodities like crude oil, manganese, iron ore, copper. And also China is a major donor to African development with big infrastructure projects and manufacturing, that sort of thing. So I say the Chinese presence in Africa is very big.
But that investment is not always perceived positively here in the U.S. Some is calling out China for creating this debt trap, and some others are calling out China for doing neo-colonialism.
Right.
How do you look at that?
Well, first of all, American officials tell me they don't see China as a threat to U.S. interests. We're doing our thing in Africa. We have investments, we have commodities, we have aid programs. What they're saying is that the Africans need to manage the Chinese presence better. For example, should they be incurring all this debt? For example, the United States and the Europeans do not lend Africa money, for infrastructure or for other aid programs. So the Chinese are still doing that. And are the Africans looking for trouble in the future? So that's an African problem. It's not an American problem, but we worry about that.
Well, many, observers say there's a flavor of geopolitics over there in Africa. Some China hawks in the White House currently are seeing China as a, threat, or there's a proxy competition going on in Africa.
Some people who are, let's say, anti-Chinese or worry about China as a threat see that in Africa as well. I personally do not. I think China is doing more good work in Africa than negative work. Apart from the debt, I'm also worried about Chinese workers remaining behind after they do their infrastructure projects to do retail and bringing in Chinese goods, therefore preventing Africans from doing their own manufacturing. I think that's a negative factor as well.
But you served many years in Africa. You brokered peace between two important countries in East Africa. There was a big shortage of infrastructure and a shortage of development. Absolutely.
I think the Chinese are doing a wonderful job. Major road projects, dams, electric generation projects. I give the Chinese tremendous credit for helping Africa develop.
Where do you think China can go next? China-Africa relations can go next?
Well, I would see China helping the Africans develop their own entrepreneurial class. Instead of China coming in and putting their own people there, they should help the Africans become manufacturers, producers of good agriculture. And I think that's the next step in really making Africa prosperous.
Do you see that happening?
Sure, why not? China has a lot of talent. They could do what the Americans are doing.
Thank you, Ambassador Cohen. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.